Our world is full of stuff we should know about, but maybe we don't. And in our modern age, it feels like the number of terms we need to be aware of grows almost daily. Some are just new slang terms, like trying to get my kids to tell me what Sigma means. I figured out Riz, that's short for charisma, but they won't tell me what Sigma means. And maybe we find ourselves wondering, what's the difference between FOMO and YOLO? Is it YOMO or FOLO? I don't know. It's hard to keep it all straight. But there's other jargon that suggests something deeper, maybe even something that sounds a little bit ominous. Like, for instance, the term dark patterns. Hey everyone, Adam Holtz here, your host of The Plugged In Show, focus on the family's weekly conversation about entertainment, pop culture, and technology. Thanks for joining us today. I'll confess, before Plugged In's Kennedy Enthank wrote about dark patterns a couple weeks ago, I had never heard of this phenomena. It kind of sounds like something that involves pentagrams and witches and occult stuff. It's not quite that nefarious. Still, dark patterns are something parents should know about, and we'll be talking about those in our first segment. And in our second segment, Paul Asay talks with the director of the new film Sing Sing, Greg Kwedar, about the redemptive themes in this gritty story. Before we dive into today's show, I want to say thanks for joining us each week as we talk about how screens and entertainment potentially influence you and your family. And we spend a lot of time talking about that on The Plugged In Show. We love connecting with you each week. And if you have been blessed by The Plugged In Show, there are 3 ways you can help us bring more episodes to you in the future. First, just tell your friends. Second, leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And third, we would invite you to make a donation to the show. You can do that today with the donate link at the top of our podcast page, thepluggedinshow.com. And any of those ways of supporting us will help our show grow, and we say thank you to you for that support. All right, with no further ado, let's get started. Joining me for our first segment today are Kennedy Enthank, Emily Chow, and Jonathan McKee. Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hey. Well, we're talking about dark patterns, and I think there used to be a show called Dark Shadows, and I actually Googled movie titles with dark in them. I was almost going to ask you, what's your favorite movie with the word dark in the title, but I actually thought that was too dark. So I've backed it off to something slightly more general. For our icebreaker this week, what's a movie that affected you deeply when you were young? And that can be positive or negative.
Well, actually, speaking of dark, I can go first.
Okay.
So, context, I Am Legend comes out. And at this point, excuse me, it's like 2007?
Yeah, that's the Will Smith movie?
Yeah, Will Smith, and he's one of the last remaining people against this kind of pseudo-zombie apocalypse kind of thing. Now, we had kind of been the family that goes out to see the yearly Will Smith release because generally they're relatively family friendly.
Right.
Around 2007, I think I was 10.
Okay.
And so we went out and we saw this one thinking, oh, well, it's Will Smith. We don't even need to
There's a dog involved.
preview. There's a dog.
How bad could it be?
Yeah, and so we saw I Am Legend, and that was my first pseudo-horror movie, I guess. That was really, that was a surprise, but we had a good time afterwards.
Did you sleep good that night?
Well, there's a point like halfway through the movie, I think it's, spoiler alert, when Will Smith is choking his dog to death.
Ooh. I'm assuming for some, important reason.
His dog contracts the virus.
It's going to be zombie dog.
Yeah.
Yep.
And during that scene, my dad leans over to me. He's like, "We can leave if you need." and my brothers were there, so I was like, no, I'm strong enough. I can do it.
Yeah, I can do it.
You're like, I have to appear tough in front of these guys.
I would say that's a great story, but I'm not sure it's a great story.
Well, actually, the worst part is that, my family has always had German Shepherds, so it's home.
Yeah. And it was a powerful acting, man. Will Smith was... That was amazing.
And it's also
Everybody cried collectively, the world.
Yeah.
Just because
absolutely.
like you watch that, it's traumatizing. You're like, oh my gosh.
Well, and it's also a perfect segue for a plugged in PSA at this point. Do your homework before you go to movies and, so you don't accidentally take your 7-year-old to a pseudo horror movie.
10. He was 10.
10. My bad. 2007. That's why I got it mixed up. All right. Emily, Jonathan.
I'll go with The Black Cauldron.
Oh, The Black Cauldron.
That movie,
Did it mess you up?
gave me nightmares when I was little, because like I watched it when I was pretty young, and I just remember being really creeped out because like yes, you see like Snow White and stuff, and there's dark magic in that, but this was like another level dark magic. Like we are raising people from the dead dark magic, and it definitely wigged me out when I was a little kid and gave me some nightmares.
All right, Jonathan.
We talked a little bit about this in a previous episode a while back, so our listeners might recall some of this discussion. One of the things I think that you resonate with certain things. I mean, I'm sure there's certain films you enjoyed or liked, but I mean, if there's something that really affected me, definitely not, I mean, being, kind of vulnerable here, during high school years when I kind of was sneaking and watching whatever I want. I remember watching, it was an R-rated film. It wasn't even that great, but there's this one called Tough Turf, and I remember it was James Spader, and it was like this and it's just like
I remember
blink
that
if you
movie.
Miss it film.
Yeah,
blink if you miss
remember
it. All kinds of content issues, whatever. But he was kind of this guy. And he looked kind of cool, but he was definitely being picked on by the other folks. He got the girl. Here's how nerdy is. He played piano. I played piano. He played piano for the girl. I was like, I could do that. I mean, it was funny how I remember as a young teen, it really did. I kind of thought it impacted me. And I actually watched it over and over again.
Yep.
And sometimes it's weird how certain things will resonate with you that aren't even necessarily great cinematically or whatever, because I definitely liked good movies, good taste, but this one kind of hit me in a place of, I would like these things, where is it? And in my search looking for it, finding it in an unlikely and probably not even a great spot, that film did affect me.
Well, and I think that illustrates another, plugged in point in that stories invite us to identify with a particular character, right? And some more than others. Not everyone's going to hit us the same way. But like you said, I mentioned I tossed in Karate Kid there. I mean, I was madly infatuated with Elizabeth Shue in 1984, and maybe slightly longer than
Who wasn't?
Right? Exactly. But I loved Karate Kid for some of the same reasons. Here's an outsider who is kind of gangly and geeky, and he wins. So, and then 30 years later, we get Cobra Kai, and that's another story entirely. So my choice, and this is a funny one, I'm going to go with a horror movie as well that I never actually saw, but just, again, seeing the commercials, and no, I'm not going to talk about Bigfoot the Mysterious Monster because I've talked about that way too
Bigfoot
much.
Was coming up.
No Bigfoot this time. The Amityville Horror, which I would have to look it up. It came out in like 79, 80, somewhere in there. Yeah. And the posters had, it was this big barn-looking house with these two huge picture windows that when you lit it just right, when you put a red light behind those windows, they looked like, eyes. The house looked like a face. So we had that style of house on our street, and I would always walk to the other side of this. I would never walk past the house. And then years and years and years later, when my wife and I were looking for our first house, there was a great deal, of course, on a house that looked like that. And I'm like, man, this house is great, but it's the Amityville Horror House. I cannot we cannot buy this house because I'm still not over that movie. And I think that those things just speak to the reality of how images, especially when we're young, by the time you're old and tired and cynical and cranky, you're maybe not paying attention, and your ability to be influenced may have been blunted slightly. But man, when we're young, those images just go in and they shape the way we see the world. And to this day, when I drive past one of those old houses that looks like that, I'm like, yeah, Amityville Horror House. Going to take a big circle around that one. So thank you for sharing your stories. And as I mentioned in the intro for today's show, we're going to be talking about dark patterns, which actually doesn't have anything to do directly with scary movies, although maybe there's a sideways trail back into it.
No, I don't think so.
But Kennedy, you recently wrote about this issue, and I loved the depth that you go into in your blog, and you'll find a link to that blog in the episode notes for today's show. I want to start with two basic questions. What are dark patterns, and why do parents need to know about them?
Yeah, so they're actually really simple. They're intentional
Be a
design.
short conversation then.
Yeah, intentional design elements that you can find on like websites, apps, even outside of the internet that are made with the purpose of manipulating the user in some way.
Okay.
Usually in order to purchase something or to take an action or share information that they otherwise, without that dark pattern, would not have done.
Okay. Can you give us a couple of examples? And you guys feel free to chime in here too as we talk about this.
Yeah, so I think a relatively an easy one that I think most people have encountered is if you have ever played a free game, like an app on your phone, you'll come across advertisements inevitably because they have to make money somehow.
Right.
And sometimes you'll come across an advertisement that has a little X in the corner.
Yep.
And it says, hey, if you wait like 5 seconds, you can click on that X and then you can get back to playing your game. But some of these advertisements, actually, they just ingrain it into the ad itself. So when you click on the X, you're actually clicking on the ad. It takes you straight to the App Store. And for most people, it's nothing more than a little bit annoying.
Right.
But, for some people, especially for like younger children, they might think, I think I must have to download this in order to keep playing. There's another one actually called Roach Motel. And it's based on subscribing to various things. So like, let's say I subscribe. It's really easy. I go online or it's just right at the very front of their app. Mm-hmm. I can subscribe to them. But then I find out later when I want to unsubscribe that, no, you can't just unsubscribe by doing the exact same easy steps. You have to call a customer representative. And then while you're on the phone, they're like, oh, we'll give you a discount if you don't unsubscribe. Why are you trying to unsubscribe? Come on, you can stay. And then eventually, after all that emotional guilt tripping and all the hoops and steps and reasons you have to give them in order to let you unsubscribe, they finally let you go. In other words, they make it really easy to subscribe, but really difficult to unsubscribe.
And the hope there is that you'll be so inconvenienced by the process of unsubscribing that you'll just stay. You'll just be like, it's worth the $10 a month or whatever you're paying.
Mm-hmm. Right. Or it's not worth the hassle of trying to figure out how to actually unsubscribe. Jonathan, were you going to jump in there?
To me, it's just, this is kind of an irritant, so I got to really be careful to not get up on my soapbox. I'm pushing the soapbox slowly away, but it bothers me when people prey upon the weak, and especially the young, and especially the old. And the young, you take even a Star Wars Hunters, and I don't want to judge Star Wars Hunters, but Bob Hoos just did a good job on the review and the plugged in page and stuff talking about it. And it's this free game, just like Kennedy just explained and stuff, but it's just riddled with ads, and it's just constantly, getting you with all these buy me, and sure, you could play and earn your way, and after hours and hours and hours advance, or just buy it now and advance now, and a lot of kids, kind of are prone to that, and they go to mom and dad, or mom and dad for some reason lets them have a credit card. I can't believe how many kids I see with credit cards nowadays. But anyway, that drives me nuts. It drives me nuts when I see that. It drives me nuts when people are preying on old people. You're gonna laugh, I literally am going to show my parents the Jason Statham movie Beekeeper, which is this one where he kicks butt, because it's the greatest. I don't know if you guys have reviewed it yet, but literally it starts by showing a call center that's ripping off old people, and it shows this poor old lady who clicks and loses her life savings to these people. But the way they do it is such a common way that I was like, my dad needs to see this, and so I'm literally going to show him, and then I can be Jason Statham and go kick butt. Anyway.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry,
you can,
I don't mean to laugh that loudly, Jonathan. Sorry.
I did.
My suspension of disbelief failed right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, just talking about preying on the weak. Yes, they prey on, older people because they're less likely to be familiar enough with technology to understand how it all truly works. But the one that Kennedy brought up in his blog was how vulnerable kids are. Yeah. And there was a psychologist, I think it was, who was on a Federal Trade Commission panel talking about it. And she was like, it's because they have underdeveloped, decision-making skills. It's because they don't understand that, unlimited virtual currencies actually do cost real, very limited dollars. Kids, they don't, that's not a concept they truly understand. Kids, and I think about when I was a kid, it's like, no, I didn't understand how money worked. Not really. When I was young enough, I just, money was there. It was like, if I wanted something. Dad
has the magic card. It has money on it.
Now, I would be told sometimes that, hey, we can't afford that right now. We're not going to get that today. I would be told that, but it wasn't until I started getting allowance once that I was like, oh, this is what they mean, you know?
Which, I mean, it even doubles when you go into these apps and it's not called money, it's called gyms.
Yes.
And so it's like, oh, it's gyms, it's not even dollars.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's cute.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it's cute
fun.
and it's confusing though for little kids because they don't understand how they're being manipulated. Like, so yeah, I think I totally agree with you. The fact that they're preying on kids and, you know, they're preying on the weak, it's kind of gross and disgusting.
And that was something that was actually really monumental in this report because the Federal Trade Commission actually had to get onto Fortnite, which if you know about Fortnite's like one of, if not the most popular battle royale shooter on the market, especially for children. One of the most popular
games with kids,
And Fortnite ended up having to pay hundreds of millions of dollars because
in a fine to the government,
essentially
back to people.
To the people.
Okay.
Yeah, and so basically what they were doing was you were able to buy these kind of character customizations or add-ons or whatever for your user.
Yeah.
And you were able to do it with just a click of a button or two. And it didn't require any PIN. It didn't require any password. It didn't require any parent authorization. It was just, all right, there you go.
So as long as the account was there, you got billed automatically.
Yeah, and so if you're... It was common, apparently, for parents to wake up to these hundreds of dollars of bills. And so the FTC was like, no, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because, and at the end of the day, there's part of you that has to say, okay, well, that's something you need to watch out for.
Right.
And you need to have that kind of self-control.
Right.
But the other big issue is Emily brought her up, Dr. Jenny Radesky was saying, she, as a professor of pediatrics at the University of Michigan, she was saying these kids don't have as good of self-control because they don't have those mature executive functions yet.
Yep.
And so they see
it's not really an issue of self-control. They're just not mature enough to understand what's happening.
Yes, that too. And when there's the whole thing is that, you know, you see this fun costume, you see this shiny thing, you see that, hey, this virtual currency that you may or may not understand actually translates to limited real life currency.
Yeah.
And they think, well, I want that. Now I have it. There we go.
Right.
Well, and you know, it's not just like, so we're talking specifically about Fortnite right here, but I mean, it's across things that you wouldn't even necessarily expect or that maybe do have some parental controls in place. Like Amazon is the one that comes to mind because my family just had an experience with this recently. My sister was traveling, they were moving across, you know, state lines and stuff. And so her kid had his iPad and my nephew went and purchased like 4 or 5 different movies on Amazon, like just with the little one click or whatever it is. And, you know, she wasn't monitoring him because her and her husband were driving. They were driving. Exactly. He's in the back seat. He's just got his iPad on. She thought he was just watching, you know, what's already available. Nope. He was purchasing movies. And luckily she was able to get back her money for like 4 of them because he like hadn't started watching them or wasn't far enough in them for it to count. But you know, she ended up having to pay whatever it was, probably $20 or something for the 5th one. And I remember like after that, she was like, how do I even teach him about this? Because he's 8. Like we were talking about it later and he's like, he was telling me the story and he's laughing and he's giggling like a little imp. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, you are awful. Like you don't even understand what you're doing. You think this is a game. And because to him it was.
This is I mean, what you're talking about is what makes parenting hard. And I was just talking with my daughter, 3-year-old son, my grandson, my only grandkid right now. We spend a lot of time with him. And we were talking over breakfast on Sunday. We were just having this conversation about all this different stuff, and we kept almost at the end of every sentence, parenting is hard. Parenting is hard. And the good stuff in parenting takes work. It takes conversations. And one of the things we were talking about is he has this fascination with like suckers right now. Like if we're in a candy store, he wants a sucker, you know, and like a red one, you know, and he's really big on them and stuff. And he'll be like, can I have it? And then there's even this conversation of if he's earned it, like, or he's done something, we said, yeah, you can have one. Then he starts to wrap. We're like, no, wait till we pay for it. What? What's that? And explain, and everything is why. Explain money. You know, where do I get money? Well, that's why I go to work. Why? You know, and it's hilarious how long it takes trying to explain this. And good parenting takes all kinds of work, and it's so easy to just give a credit card or let our kids sign up on that. But I mean, this is nothing new. Adam and I could remember back when, well, you guys might have experienced this maybe with your first flip phone, but remember when texting used to charge 10 cents per text or whatever? There was parents that when this first happened were getting $300 and $400 bills because they'd never had the conversation with their kid, and they didn't realize what their kid was doing. And all of a sudden they see that, oh, guess what? Every one of those texts, hey, what are you doing? Nothing. Cool. What about you? Nothing. Cool. $10. That was $1. That was $1 right there. And it's interesting because whenever you sign up, and it's one of those life lessons. I just signed up for a piece of software at work last week, and they give you 2 options. They're like, you could try it for a week, and you could try it here with limited whatever. Just you can actually sign up here and you'll try it. Or if you put your credit card down, we'll give it to you for a month free, and you'll get this, and this.
But then you forget to unsubscribe.
And just cancel it, which we just talked about, right? And like how hard it is to unsubscribe later if you want. But you get all this advanced stuff. So a lot of the games are set up this way. Hey, you just put a credit card. You don't need to. But they dangle this stuff in front of our kids, and good parenting takes conversations with our kids about this, and maybe even the guideline of don't put your credit card down because you can't give an 8-year-old a credit card because look what will happen. But, this takes conversations. This takes bonding time. This takes boundaries. It takes both.
Well, and it takes an understanding of where your kids are at developmentally. Like, again, when we just talk about it in terms of morals, or moral development, they don't have self-control. Yeah, some kids don't have self-control, but there is a developmental process in play too. And understanding that your kids don't have the maturity to even make some of those decisions is an important part of the process too. Kennedy?
Yeah, and I just want to remind everyone listening that we've been talking a lot about kids because they're more susceptible to this, but this isn't something that is just facing kids. Right. This is something that, when I was doing the research on this, I was like, that's what that's called, because I've encountered so many of these.
Yeah.
For instance, like getting a plane ticket. You get a plane ticket or you buy something, and then right at the checkout screen, there's this little box that says, would you like to upgrade to this for another $50? Right.
6 inches more of legroom.
And guess what? If you don't uncheck it, it will assume you want it because you'll just go straight to checkout, and they already have the box checked in for you. And so a lot of people, they don't even see that. They just go on through, and then suddenly they've paid an extra $50, and they're like, "Where did that come from?"
Right.
Well, and we have to teach our kids to navigate this world because everything. We just bought a movie ticket, and I remember when I was done buying the movie ticket on Fandango, so I could get my seats ahead of time because I didn't want to have to go to the theater to buy the seats. Okay, I'm that guy. And when I was done buying it, it immediately goes, "You just qualified for a free month of Apple TV,
right.
Sign here, which if you give your credit card, you can get it. And you say no, and it gives you 4 other offers. You just subscribe to free whatever bagging at Safeway grocery store. You just survived to free karaoke night at Bob's Karaoke Bar. You're like, what the heck? It gives you 5. You have to say no to 5 things. This is now life. We have to teach our kids to navigate this.
Yeah, and that's really, actually what he's talking about is another one when you get to the checkout and it says, oh, yeah, the ticket itself was like $10,
right.
But the convenience fee and the delivery fee and the service charge,
right.
And now it's $25, but you're so deep in that they're just hoping that you'll just comp the loss.
Yep.
That's especially popular on ticket sales for concerts.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think ultimately, you do have organizations like the FTC who are kind of cracking down on some of these companies that are doing that. They're not going to be able to find every single one. And honestly, you shouldn't rely on them to find every single one. This is something where parents need to take personal responsibility, not only for their kids this time, for themselves too, because this is something you have to watch out for. So it can be really helpful to just kind of sit down and talk about, okay, here are some of the more common ones that I've seen. Here's, just say no,
Right.
It's a snake oil salesman technique is how I kind of described it in the article, is you have someone who is dangling this medicine in front of you and they say, oh, it's going to help. But then, when you actually buy it, you realize you've been scammed.
Yep.
And this is just a different type of scam. And just like any other type of scam, it's something that you will kind of grow and experience with over time, and you'll be able to recognize it. I never see an advertisement that says like free for the next 10 days without looking at the fine print that's
Right.
below
Yeah.
it, because
if
then
it says free, you have to ask the question, where am I paying?
exactly
Right.
And so, I think that's a common one that most people recognize by now. They look at the coupon and they're like, some restrictions apply. Let me see what those restrictions
Right.
are.
Yeah.
This is something that, because of the general novelty of the internet still, it's something that we haven't encountered as much yet. So this is something that you want to familiarize yourself with so that you can protect yourself and your family.
Yeah, we got to model it.
Yep, we have to model it. And as with many things we talk about here at Plugged In, it involves conversation, it involves engagement, it involves really knowing what your kids are doing with their screens. So this is just a different angle than I think we've talked about before. And I hope as we've talked about dark patterns today, there have been some good anchor points for you and your family and what you're experiencing, and just helping you navigate this area with your family. Thanks, guys.
I'm talking with Greg Kwedar, who wrote and directed the critically acclaimed film Sing Sing. The movie focuses on the rehabilitation through the arts program at Sing Sing Maximum Security Prison and the life-changing impact the program and its people can have on each other. Thank you so much for being with us, Greg.
Thank you, Paul. It's an honor to be here.
So I know that on your website, it says that your mission is to tell stories of human connection in impossible places. And that feels like it was almost written for the movie Sing Sing. I mean, that feels like the ultimate manifestation of that goal, right? And can you tell me a little bit about how Sing Sing came about?
I've been working on this project for over 8 years. And I first discovered this story quite unexpectedly. I was producing a short documentary inside of a maximum security prison in Kansas, and it was my first time ever behind the walls. I'd never been into a facility like this. And on a tour of it, we were doing a film about something else, but I passed by a cell and there was a young man raising a rescue dog inside of a cell. And immediately in that moment, all my expectations of prison and people who are incarcerated were upended. And a lot of those expectations are from the movies about prison that I'd grown up watching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But what struck me was the healing that was happening in both directions between this man and this animal. It was just immediately evident to me that there was love blooming in that room.
That's really incredible.
I was just desperate to know, was there anyone out there doing things differently? And in the hotel that night, I typed that into Google, who is doing things differently in prison. And which really what happened. And near the top of the search field, thank you, Google, not sponsoring this interview, but near the top of the search field was this program in New York, Rehabilitation Through the Arts. And they've been around since 1996. They had done all the classic plays. They have been covered in a lot of press, but there was this Esquire article about a original comedy that had been performed for 2 nights only at Sing Sing, of a time-traveling musical comedy. And this really happened too. And there was just something about the tone of it, of the playfulness of this play that these men put on, juxtaposed with such a dark environment, that felt like life to me, and it felt like an invitation that was like directly addressed to me, that was like pulling me into its orbit. And I reached out to the journalist, but then also the real theater teacher, Brent Buell. And he very quickly said, like, if you want to understand this story, you need to meet the men who lived it. And he invited me and my writing partner to New York and to a breakfast with the alumni that are now actually featured in this movie now.
Wow. That's incredible. And really, that's one of the fantastic things about this movie, is that you use real people, real alumni, as you say, who went through the program, who went through prison and are now out. I know this isn't the first time that you have worked with quote unquote real people to make a story. Yep. What kind of authenticity does working with people who have sort of walked this life bring to a production?
My creative partner, Clint, and I, who's also a director, and he directed a movie called Jockey that really started to show us the power of what happens when you sort of can really slip behind the curtain into the real world, but tell a narrative fictional work. Mm-hmm. And, I think the thing is that's most fascinating to us is we want to make films where we allow space for the world to breathe into it, and to shoot in real settings, and to give space and room for the people who exist in these worlds, like, to visit us, and share stories from their lives. And what happens in the work that we're doing now, when you take established actors, like we have 2 Oscar nominees in this film, Coleman Domingo and Paul Asay, a very celebrated theater actor named Sean San Jose, and you invite them into the room with alumni of this program who have direct lived experience, there's an alchemy that happens there that is very hard to actually describe the magic of that, but it's what happens when people come into space and they can be both a teacher and a student. So our established actors have a lot to teach our alumni cast who have never acted in front of a camera before. They have a lot of stage experience but never acted in front of a camera, and they can bring so much of their craft both into their own performances, because there's things that in the craft of acting that you can only really convey through technique. And then there are things that you can only really convey through just being totally bare and raw.
Yeah.
And that was what was a gift about this particular ensemble, is both were operating at the same time and informing each other.
Yeah. And I think I read somewhere that Coleman Domingo actually said that this might have been the most raw that he's ever been in a movie, and I do think that comes across when you watch it on screen. Clarence Macklin, who sort of is the opposite to Coleman Domingo's character, he, as you say, he was an alumni. He is riveting on screen, and you can kind of see that alchemy take place when they have scenes together, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, Clarence, when I first met him 8 years ago, when he walked through the door, I pretty much felt him before he walked through the door. I mean,
he has that kind of presence. Yeah.
He's got that presence. And you always hear, like, around Hollywood, when they try to describe like someone who's kind of has star power, what is that? That it factor and the thing, because it's like, it's something we can't fully put our finger on, but all we know is that we're drawn to them. There's a magnetism that pulls us into their orbit. And he has that just like Coleman does. And what I love so much about Clarence is, he's got a abundance of charisma, very funny as well. He's a very deep person too. And he has harnessed so many experiences of his lifetime and channels it into his art and is able to distill it into a kind of poetry.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit about the rawness and what that brings to something like this. It was interesting to me as I watched the movie, because you have this really fascinating juxtaposition between how closed Macklin is when the movie begins. You see that hardness, you see that coldness. And really, there's one character who says, we're learning to be human again, essentially. And it does seem like that is a lot of the movie's power, where you have these people who have been doing these roles, who have been, inside this locked place. They've sort of locked themselves in their own personas, and it's really learning to be human again.
Sean Dino Johnson is the one who shares that story, and that was something that, again, has come from his own life. He's recounting a story that he experienced himself. And the power of this program and of the process of coming through it is that however we harden ourselves, it can be perceived as strength, but it's kind of a false strength, And especially in a prison environment, warmth, empathy, compassion is seen as weakness and maybe even often preyed upon. But once you start to realize that it's actually a strength, it can very quickly multiply and attract people around it, because it costs a lot to carry armor on your body. It's heavy. Armor's heavy.
Yeah.
And if you slog through life, like with your defenses up all the time and with your sword in your hand and you're dragging it along the ground, the lightness and the freedom of like putting that down for the first time is pretty exhilarating.
Yeah. And that's another irony of the movie, really. I mean, you have these people who are not free, and yet they are finding freedom within this program. Can you say what attracts you to these types of stories? The whole idea of finding that human connection in difficult places.
I have, since I've been doing this since 2008, and I have traveled into some pretty rough spots, in places where there was a lot of despair, darkness, whether that's conflict or war. I've been in Rwanda and told a story, from survivors of the genocide. I've spent a lot of time on the U.S.-Mexico border. And yet, kind of through all of this, what I started to realize about people, when you're in a very dark place, you're surrounded by despair, like kind of one of two things happens. Like it can kind of crush you and destroy you. Or if you climb out of it and you choose to love again, there's something that we trust about people who have climbed up, that love can be trusted.
Yeah.
Because they came from where they came from. What a more simple way to say it is, like, I'm just interested in hard-won optimism, and the more examples of it I find around me, the more it kind of gives me courage that it can continue to multiply.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate your time. Good luck with the movie. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of time with us.
Thanks, Paul.
Well, now it's time for a segment of the show we call Pop Culture Connection, wherein and wherewith we are joined by Ashley, our producer. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Adam.
And Ashley has pop culture-ish questions to ask us, and our job,
Pop culture
lots of answers. Not good answers, quantities, truckloads of answers. And whoever has the most wins.
Yes.
It's all about quantity.
Yes.
Quality, don't care.
That's right.
Ashley, take it away.
All right, we're going to do kind of a this or that edition of
Oh,
pop culture. I like that.
Love it.
So I want your why answers is going to be your quantity. All right? Kennedy.
Okay. Yes.
Mario or Zelda? Why?
Ooh. Legend of Zelda. Link, because he has all of that equipment. He has his bombs. He has his the boomerang that like causes tornadoes. He has the Sheikah Slate. He can like freeze time with that. I mean, that's just already overpowered. Mario's just a plumber. He can't really do anything at the end of the day unless he picks up a magical flower, which we are against drug use at Plugged In, so you can't do that. Anyways, Link also, if he fails, he has a fairy that'll bring him back to life. He can get upgrades to his weapon. He has the Master Sword, which cannot break.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, he killed it.
That was awesome.
Nice.
How many was that?
Also,
12.
I think he wins just for that.
I think he does. It's like
He worked in a plug-in
we unleashed
message.
a Kennedy I've not seen before. That was
nice.
I like
that wasn't
Zelda.
Kennedy on Think. That was Kennedy Unplugged.
Question.
You know,
Yes.
it felt like an Olympic level answer.
I know.
Yeah,
Kennedy
I cannot top that.
That's as fast as I can talk.
Yeah.
Good job, Kennedy.
Dude, that was.
Well, you were
I've
even
never
thinking
heard
while you were
Kennedy.
talking that fast, which I often
know.
don't do.
Yes.
Who's
All right,
Kennedy?
Emily.
Okay.
C.S. Lewis or J.R.R. Tolkien?
C.S. Lewis. The Hobbit is my favorite book of all time. However, C.S. Lewis has written so much more than J.R.R. Tolkien. He has the entire world of Narnia. He has all of his other books. I just finished reading Mere Christianity, and let me tell you, you want to talk about a book that packs a wallop in terms of Christianity, that is the one to read. No, and then he also has a sci-fi series. I haven't read it yet, but I want to read it because I'm just like, oh my goodness, I have to read this book. The way he writes, it's still applicable today. Everything he has written is just like...
Nice. That was a surprising answer. I was expecting
space
something
trilogy.
different.
Yeah, I know. I think
That's
trilogy.
awesome.
And she starts with, "Well, The Hobbit is my favorite book,
It is.
but it's the other guy."
And I
But
think
it's
you
the
need
other
a
guy.
point for that.
favorite author is C.S. Lewis. Favorite book is The Hobbit.
Very cool. Very cool.
funny.
I got 9 points out of that, but that was really good.
good.
I was trying to talk fast.
Really, really
How many
good.
did I get?
12.
12.
Yeah,
I blocked it out.
It's a number
I
so...
think my brain was like recovering the oxygen.
Yeah. I understand that.
Yeah, you got to learn how to operate with no oxygen when you talk that fast. You got to go Gilmore Girls on
Right.
that.
All right, Adam.
All right.
Oh my gosh.
Will Ferrell or Adam Sandler?
I'm going to go Will Ferrell because, more cowbell for starters. Will Ferrell is, I think, more versatile as an actor. He has hair that is better than Adam Sandler's. I think, he did this series. Well, I can't say that. Yeah, now I'm thinking of all the things I can't say about
Elf?
Will Ferrell. Yeah, Elf.
Elf.
Thank you for
Yeah.
prompting me. Elf is a classic.
Kicking and screaming.
I just like Will Ferrell better. Adam Sandler's got some funny stuff, but I think Will Ferrell's funnier.
Nice.
Buddy the Elf,
nice.
what's your favorite color?
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
you did
7
it. You made the
points.
world's best coffee.
Very good. 7 points.
Thank you. I'll
Good
take
job.
7. I'll take 7 points.
All right. The bar was set high.
Yes, the
we
bar-
have to
Yeah,
say.
the bar is very high. I don't even know if we're
All right.
even trying.
All right.
Jonathan, bring us home.
Jonathan, here we go. X-Files or Twilight Zone?
Oh, Twilight Zone for sure, because, I mean, you got the old black and whites. They're awesome. If you go, you watch all the cameos. They all have got this amazing twist ending. Rod Serling's awesome, even though he has lockjaw. And plus, you get to see him smoke. What kind of cigarettes does he smoking? The outer space, look to the future, way beyond. The remake in the 80s still, even though somebody died, sadly, 4 different directors. Do you know Spielberg was one of them? But when you go back to the old ones, you see that these are... Oh,
Man.
It goes
I
fast.
think Kennedy still got me.
He did.
The creepy
Yes.
eyeball at the very start of the intro.
Okay,
yeah.
you need to ask me that next time, and I'm going to do X-Files. Okay.
Okay.
Because
We'll
X-Files.
put that question back in the box.
All right.
That's
How many points for Jonathan?
9.
9.
So Kennedy's our
Kennedy.
winner.
Nice.
I
Congratulations.
Kennedy
You know,
killed
I
it.
think I joined the podcast at like episode around 100,
Uh-huh.
and I think this is my first time winning.
It's your first win.
Wow.
Almost 150 episodes later.
Yeah, we
We're
are.
almost there.
There you
We're
go.
almost to
Kennedy
episode
Unchained.
250, which is actually a great segue into bringing our conversation in for a close today. If you haven't done so recently, go to thepluggedinshow.com and just scan back through some of the stuff we've talked about. We have covered a tremendous amount of pop culture and technology, information, trends, topics over the last 4.5 years or so. And we would love for you to go back and check out some of those episodes. And as I said earlier, leave a review for us. We would also love to connect with you about what we talked about today. How have you seen or experienced dark patterns in your life? Or maybe your kids have gotten into one of the things we talked about today. We would love to hear your story. And here's how you can do that. You can go to thepluggedinshow.com and leave us a voicemail with your answer to those questions, and we might just include it on a future show. Or you can reach out to us at team@thepluggedinshow.com. And this week, in fact, we heard from Mike Wazowski. Yeah, the same name as the character from Monsters, Inc. And actually, he spells it a little bit differently, so I will protect his identity in case you're concerned that I used his last name. He said it was okay. And Mike assures us, though, that that's what everybody calls him. And he was responding to our recent question, what is the best animated movie not made by Disney or Pixar? And Mike writes, very simply, non-Disney Pixar best movie is Shrek. So, Mike, thanks for writing in this week. We loved hearing from you. And we would love to hear from the rest of you as well about the things we talked about today. Or even if you're listening to another episode further back, let us know what you think. And if you haven't done so yet, we would love it if you picked up a copy of our team's new book, Becoming a Screen Savvy Family. We spend a lot of time talking about exactly the kind of things we talk about on the Plugged In Show. We want to provide practical, helpful information for you and your family with regard to screens and technology. And just like we do on the show, you'll find lots of personal stories there as well. So today, for a gift of any amount, we will send you a copy of Becoming a Screen Savvy Family, and you can find information on how to do that in the episode notes for today's show. Well, thanks again for spending some time with us this week at the Plugged In Show. We know you have a lot of ways you can choose to spend your time. We like spending some of our time with you, and we would invite you back to the table for another conversation next week on the Plugged In Show.
Are you already in the mood for Christmas? The lights, the music? It's only summer. Well, you're not alone. Celebrate Christmas in July by listening to Focus on the Family's Christmas Stories podcast. You'll hear heartwarming stories, get ideas for fun activities to do with your family, and remember the joy of Christ's birth. Listen to the Christmas Stories podcast at focusonthefamily.com/Christmas stories or wherever you get your podcasts.